Hey everyone, touring into a tonight where Venworld that vanished beneath sheets of ice and time itself. A world where colossal creatures roamed endless frozen plains, where our ancestors carved out impossible lives in landscapes that would challenge everything we think we know about survival. The dark secrets of the lost Ice Age world. Before you settle in, take a moment to like the video if you're enjoying what we're exploring together, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what draws you to these forgotten chapters of history. Maybe dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's step back through tens of thousands of years to uncover what the ice has been hiding all along. Deep beneath the permafrost of Siberia, locked within the caves of Europe, and buried under the shifting remnants of ancient glaciers, the Ice Age still whispers its secrets to those willing to listen. This wasn't just a barren wasteland of endless winter that our textbooks once described. No, this frozen world pulsed with life in ways that would leave us breathless. Massive woolly mammoths trudged across grasslands that stretched beyond the horizon. Saber-toothed cats stalked through forests that existed where oceans now roll. Giant ground sloths, some cars, foe as large as small, raged in valleys that are now buried under miles of ice and sediment. And threading through all of this, early humans not just survived, but thrived, creating art, developing sophisticated tools, and building communities that would lay the foundation for everything we call civilization today. For generations, much of this world remained locked away, hidden beneath layers of ice, time, and our own assumptions about what prehistoric life was really like. But as glaciers retreat and archaeological techniques advance beyond anything previous generations could have imagined, discoveries are emerging that rewrite everything we thought we understood about humanity's deepest past. We're finding frozen mammoths, with their organs intact, their last meals still preserved in their stomachs. Cave paintings that speak of lost cultures with spiritual depth we're only beginning to comprehend. DNA sequences preserved in permafrost that tell stories spanning hundreds of thousands of years. Entire civilizations that once flourished on lands now completely submerged beneath our modern seas. These discoveries don't just fill in blank spaces on ancient maps. They challenge our fundamental understanding of what it meant to be human during one of the harshest eras our species has ever endured. The most profound discovery of this year came from a place that seems almost impossibly distant from the frozen landscapes we typically associate with Ice Age revelations. In Australia's Clogs Cave, researchers working alongside Aboriginal elders uncovered something extraordinary. A ritual site that has been in continuous use for over 23,000 years. 23,000 years. Let that settle in for a moment. This sacred space was already ancient when the last ice sheets were at their maximum extent across the northern continents. What makes this discovery even more remarkable is how it came to light. For decades, archaeologists had interpreted Clogs Cave as nothing more than an occasional campsite, a temporary shelter used by Aboriginal hunters during their seasonal migrations. The evidence seemed straightforward enough. Stone tools, fire hearths, animal bones, standard archaeological markers of transient occupation. But this interpretation never sat well with the local Gunai people, whose oral traditions told a completely different story. Their elders knew this cave as something far more significant than a simple shelter. In their traditional knowledge, passed down through countless generations, Clogs Cave was a sacred retreat where medicine men and women known as Mulla Mulung came to perform rituals central to their spiritual practice. These weren't casual ceremonies. They were profound connections to the ancestral world, practices that required specific sacred objects and deep spiritual preparation. When the Gunai elders requested that archaeologists return to the cave and work collaboratively with traditional knowledge holders, something beautiful happened. Science and indigenous wisdom came together to reveal truths that neither could have uncovered alone. Among the discoveries were a pair of wooden sticks that had seemed unremarkable in previous excavations. But viewed through the lens of traditional knowledge, these sticks revealed their true purpose. They were ritual implements used in spell-casting ceremonies that formed the heart of what may be the world's longest, continuously practiced spiritual tradition. Think about what this means for our understanding of Ice Age humanity. While glaciers covered vast portions of the Earth, while megafauna roamed landscapes that no longer exist, human beings were already developing and maintaining complex spiritual systems. They weren't just struggling for survival in a hostile world. They were creating meaning, establishing connections to forces beyond the physical realm, developing traditions so powerful and significant that they would be maintained without interruption for over 200 centuries. This discovery forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about the sophistication of Ice Age cultures. Far from being primitive hunter-gatherers focused solely on finding their next meal, these were people with rich interior lives, complex belief systems, and spiritual practices that could weather the most dramatic climate changes in human history. The continuity revealed at Clogg's Cave suggests that even during the harshest periods of glacial advance, when survival itself was uncertain, humans maintained their connection to something larger than immediate physical needs. But Australia isn't the only place where ice is revealing secrets about sophisticated prehistoric cultures. In Norway's high mountains, melting glacial ice has begun to release artifacts that have been frozen in perfect preservation for over 1,500 years. These aren't random objects lost by careless travellers. They represent a sophisticated hunting system that reveals just how ingenious Ice Age peoples could be when faced with the challenges of their environment. The most recent discoveries include SC complete-earing stick flags, delicate banners that ancient hunters attached to poles and arranged in strategic lines across the landscape. To modern eyes, these might seem like simple decorations, but they were actually components of an elaborate hunting technology that demonstrated deep understanding of animal behavior and environmental psychology. Reindeer, the archaeologists explain, are highly sensitive creatures that will instinctively avoid anything that resembles a human silhouette or suggests movement where there shouldn't be any. By placing these flags in carefully calculated positions, hunters could create invisible barriers that would guide entire herds towards specific locations where other hunters lay in wait. It was a system that required not just knowledge of reindeer behavior, but sophisticated understanding of landscape, wind patterns, seasonal migration routes, and group coordination. This wasn't opportunistic hunting by desperate individuals. This was strategic, planned, community-based resource management that could sustain groups through the harshest winters. The preservation of these artifacts in Norwegian ice reveals details about Ice Age life that would have been impossible to discover through any other means. The organic materials, the delicate construction techniques, even the specific knots and weaving patterns used in their creation. All of this information was locked away in the ice, waiting for the right moment to emerge and tell its story about human ingenuity in the face of environmental extremes. These Norwegian discoveries are part of a larger pattern of revelations emerging from melting ice around the world. Viking-era arrowheads, Iron Age tunics, 3,400-year-old leather shoes, even woven mittens that speak to the practical concerns of staying warm in a world where winter could mean the difference between life and death. Each artifact is a window into daily life during periods when survival required not just physical strength, but innovative thinking and sophisticated planning. But perhaps no discovery captures the imagination quite like the perfectly preserved remains of the creatures that once dominated Ice Age landscapes. The woolly mammoth, standing over 10 feet tall with tusks that could sweep aside obstacles or dig through snow to reach buried vegetation, has become the iconic symbol of this vanished world. For centuries, mammoth bones pulled from frozen ground were misunderstood, sometimes interpreted as the remains of mythical giants or dragons described in folklore. Today, the Siberian permafrost continues to yield mammoth remains that go far beyond simple bones. These are complete specimens with skin still intact, hair that retains its original colour and texture, organs that could be studied as if the animal had died yesterday rather than tens of thousands of years ago. The level of preservation is so extraordinary that scientists can analyze not just the physical structure of these ancient creatures, but their genetics, their diet, even the microorganisms that lived in their digestive systems. When researchers examine the stomach contents of these frozen giants, they're reading the biography of an entire ecosystem. Plants that no longer grow anywhere on Earth, pollen that tells stories about ancient climate patterns, seeds that reveal the seasonal patterns of Ice Age vegetation. Some mammoth specimens contain such detailed dietary information that scientists can reconstruct not just what these animals ate, but when they ate it, what time of year they died, and what the landscape looked like during their final days. The genetic information preserved in mammoth remains has opened up possibilities that would have seemed like pure fantasy just a generation ago. Scientists are now seriously discussing the potential for de-extinction, the possibility of using genetic engineering to bring woolly mammoths back to life in the modern world. While the technical challenges are enormous, the quality of DNA preservation in permafrost means that we have more complete genetic information about some Ice Age species than we do about many living animals. But the frozen world preserved more than just individual creatures and their artifacts. It also hid entire landscapes, complete ecosystems that thrived during periods when sea levels were dramatically lower than they are today. Around 8,000 to 6,000 years before the Common Era, areas that are now covered by the North and Baltic Seas were vast plains that supported complex human civilizations. These weren't marginal environments where desperate groups eked out subsistence livings. Archaeological evidence suggests that these submerged lands, particularly the region known as Doggerland, represented some of the most attractive territory for prehistoric settlement anywhere in Europe. Rich forests, abundant rivers, diverse wildlife populations. This was a paradise for Ice Age peoples, a landscape so favourable for human occupation that it supported sophisticated societies for thousands of years. As the last ice sheets melted and global sea levels rose, this entire world disappeared beneath the waves. Settlements that had flourished for millennia were abandoned as rising waters claimed more and more territory. The people who had called these lands home were forced to migrate, carrying their knowledge and traditions to higher ground, leaving behind the physical remains of their civilizations to be preserved in underwater archaeological sites that we're only now beginning to explore. The scale of what was lost is staggering. Researchers estimate that over 7.5 million square miles of additional land were above water during the Ice Age, with more than 1 million square miles of that area lying along Europe's existing coastlines. When you consider that human societies had been developing and thriving in these areas for thousands of years, you begin to understand that our picture of prehistoric human achievement may be fundamentally incomplete. The most tantalizing evidence comes from artifacts dredged from the North Sea during commercial fishing and construction operations. Stone tools, including flint implements that date back 50,000 years, reveal not just that humans lived in these now submerged areas, but that they were creating sophisticated technology and maintaining complex cultural traditions. Some of these tools were made from materials that had to be transported over considerable distances, suggesting trade networks and social connections that spanned far greater territories than we previously imagined possible for Ice Age peoples. What makes these discoveries even more significant is what they tell us about the end of the Ice Age itself. The flooding of Doggerland and similar regions wasn't a gradual process that allowed for orderly retreat. It was often catastrophic, with massive walls of water released by collapsing ice dams that could transform landscapes in a matter of days or weeks. The people who survived these events carried with them not just their physical possessions, but memories of lost homelands that may have influenced flood narratives in cultures around the world. The story continues to unfold as underwater archaeology techniques become more sophisticated and ambitious. Projects like Subnautica, a collaboration between institutions in Denmark, Germany, and the United Kingdom, are using advanced sonar mapping and underwater excavation techniques to explore these submerged landscapes systematically. With over $16 million in funding, These researchers are working to uncover evidence of civilizations that have been hidden beneath the waves for thousands of years. Their discoveries are already challenging conventional timelines of human development. Underwater cities like Pavlopetri in Greece and Heraklion off the Egyptian coast have revealed sophisticated urban planning, monumental architecture, and artistic achievement that existed thousands of years before what we traditionally consider the dawn of complex civilization. These weren't simple fishing villages or temporary settlements. They were thriving urban centers with evidence of long-distance trade, specialized craftsmanship, and complex social organization. Perhaps the most controversial discovery lies off the coast of India, where an entire ancient city rests beneath the waters of the Gulf of Kambat. When oceanographers from the National Institute of Ocean Technology conducted deep-sea explorations in the early 2000s, they uncovered something that shouldn't have existed according to our established understanding of human civilization. A submerged city stretching across several square kilometers, complete with artifacts, pottery, and human remains that date back over 9,000 years. 9,000 years. That places this civilization thousands of years before the Harappan society, which we had long considered one of the earliest urban civilizations in the region. The implications are staggering. If these findings are accurate, they suggest that sophisticated urban centers were already flourishing during the final stages of the Ice Age, in areas that are now completely underwater. The artifacts recovered from the site show evidence of advanced pottery techniques, organized urban planning, and complex social structures that challenge everything we thought we knew about the timeline of human development. What makes these underwater discoveries so compelling is how they align with a pattern we're seeing around the world. During the height of the last ice age, sea levels were not just slightly lower than they are today. They were dramatically lower, sometimes by as much as 130 meters. That's over 400 feet of additional shoreline, millions of square miles of habitable land that is now permanently submerged beneath our modern oceans. Think about what this means for our understanding of prehistoric human achievement. We've been studying the archaeology of Ice Age peoples based on sites that happen to be located far enough inland to avoid flooding when the glaciers melted. But what if the most advanced civilizations, the most sophisticated settlements, the richest cultural centers were located in coastal areas that offered the best access to marine resources, trade routes, and favorable climates? All of that evidence would now be sitting on the ocean floor, preserved in underwater archaeological sites that we've barely begun to explore. Recent estimates suggest that there may be up to 20,000 prehistoric underwater sites in the northern seas of Europe alone, dating back anywhere from 6,000 to 300,000 years. The preservation conditions in these underwater environments are actually superior to what we find on land. Organic materials like wood, textiles, and plant remains that would have decomposed long ago in terrestrial sites can survive for millennia when protected by sediment and seawater. Some comparative studies have found that underwater sites preserve up to 49 times more biological material than equivalent sites on land. This means that the greatest archaeological discoveries of the future may indeed lie beneath the waves, in places where Ice Age peoples built their most important settlements during the tens of thousands of years, when vast areas of our current ocean floors were dry land. The wooden tools, the textile fragments, the organic art objects, the perishable technologies that defined so much of prehistoric human culture but rarely survive in land-based archaeological sites. All of this may be waiting for us in underwater locations that we haven't even begun to systematically explore. But the secrets revealed by melting ice and rising seas tell us more than just stories about lost civilizations and forgotten landscapes. They also reveal one of the most dramatic and mysterious chapters in recent Earth history, the mass extinction that wiped out most of the magnificent creatures that had dominated Ice Age ecosystems for hundreds of thousands of years. Around 11,700 years ago, as the last Ice Age was drawing to a close, North America experienced one of the most catastrophic extinction events in the planet's recent history. 38 genera of mammals vanished, including some of the most spectacular creatures ever to walk the earth. Massive proboscideans like mammoths, mastodons, and gomphotheres that weighed more than 4.5 tons simply disappeared from landscapes where they had thrived for millennia. Giant ground sloths the size of small cars, saber-toothed cats with canine teeth longer than kitchen knives, short-faced bears that stood 12 feet tall on their hind legs, American cheetahs, dire wolves, and dozens of other species that had successfully survived multiple climate cycles suddenly found themselves unable to adapt to changing conditions at the end of the Pleistocene epoch. The mystery of what caused this mass extinction has puzzled scientists for decades. Some researchers point to human hunting pressure, arguing that the arrival of Clovis peoples with their sophisticated stone-tipped spears created an overkill scenario that these large animals had never encountered before. Archaeological evidence shows that Clovis hunters did indeed target megafauna, and their arrival in North America does seem to coincide roughly with the timing of the extinctions. But other scientists argue that climate change was the primary culprit, pointing to the dramatic environmental shifts that occurred as glacial conditions gave way to our current interglacial period. As temperatures warmed and precipitation patterns changed, the grassland ecosystems that supported large grazing animals gave way to forests and wetlands that couldn't sustain the same biomass of megafauna. Recent research from the La Brea tar pits has added a new dimension to this debate, suggesting that the reality was more complex than either human hunting or climate change alone. The fossil evidence from this remarkable site, where thousands of animals became trapped in asphalt seeps over tens of thousands of years, provides an unprecedented record of exactly when different species disappeared from the landscape. The findings suggest that the extinction was largely driven by human-caused fires in an ecosystem that had been made vulnerable by rising temperatures, habitat change, and a centuries-long megadrought. Between 13,300 and 12,900 years ago, Southern California experienced environmental conditions that made the landscape particularly susceptible to fire. Charcoal records show that fires increased dramatically around 13,500 years ago and peaked between 13,200 and 12,900 years ago. This wasn't necessarily intentional destruction by human beings. Many indigenous cultures use controlled burning as a land management technique, creating grasslands that attracted game animals and prevented the buildup of fuel that could lead to catastrophic wildfires. But in an ecosystem already stressed by changing climate conditions, even carefully managed fires could have had devastating consequences for large animals that required vast territories and stable food sources. The timing reveals a tragic irony in the story of Ice Age North America. Humans had been living alongside megafauna for 2,000 to 3,000 years before the extinctions began. Archaeological evidence suggests that early peoples arrived on the Pacific coast 16,000 to 15,000 years ago and coexisted with giant mammals for millennia without causing their disappearance. The extinction event wasn't the immediate result of human arrival, but rather the consequence of complex interactions between human activities, climate change, and environmental vulnerability that took centuries to reach a tipping point. Similar patterns appear to have played out in other parts of the world, though with different timing and different specific causes. In the Arctic regions, megafauna extinctions followed a particularly complex pattern related to the unique challenges of high-latitude environments during periods of rapid climate change. Arctic megafauna like woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceros, and cave lions had survived previous climate cycles by maintaining the ability to disperse across vast geographical ranges when local conditions became unfavorable. During glacial periods, much of the Arctic consisted of continuous grassland ecosystems known as the Mammoth Steppe, which provided corridors for long-distance movement between different regions. But the end of the last ice age created a perfect storm of conditions that made this survival strategy impossible. As climate warmed, the spread of peatlands and forests fragmented the grassland habitats that these animals depended on. At the same time, rising sea levels severed the land bridges that had allowed animals to move between continents and major landmasses. For the first time in hundreds of thousands of years, Arctic megafauna found themselves trapped in isolated populations, without the ability to recolonize areas where local extinctions had occurred. The fossil record suggests that many Arctic species actually experienced brief population booms during the initial stages of warming periods, when improved growing conditions created temporary bonanzas of high-quality grazing. But these population increases made the subsequent crashes even more devastating when habitat fragmentation and isolation prevented recovery. The loss of these magnificent creatures represents more than just a biological tragedy. It marked the end of ecosystems that had no modern parallel. Landscapes where massive herbivores maintained vast grasslands through their grazing and trampling, supporting intricate food webs that included some of the most spectacular predators ever to evolve. The disappearance of megafauna fundamentally altered the structure and function of ecosystems across the globe, changes whose effects we're still trying to understand today. Some scientists have proposed that the extinction of large herbivores may have actually accelerated climate change by allowing forests to expand into areas that had previously been maintained as grasslands. Grasslands reflect more sunlight and store more carbon in their soils than forests, so the replacement of mammoth steppe with forest and tundra ecosystems may have contributed to the warming that characterized the early Holocene period. The megafaunal extinction also had profound impacts on the human societies that had evolved alongside these creatures. Archaeological evidence suggests that the disappearance of large game animals forced human populations to develop new hunting strategies, new technologies, and new social organizations adapted to landscapes dominated by smaller, more diverse prey species. In some regions, the loss of megafauna may have contributed to the development of agriculture, as human groups that could no longer rely on hunting large animals were forced to find alternative food sources through plant cultivation and the domestication of smaller mammals. The transition from Ice Age hunter-gatherer societies to the agricultural civilizations that would eventually dominate human history may have been driven, in part, by the ecological consequences of megafaunal extinction. But not all of the mysteries surrounding the end of the Ice Age involve gradual processes of extinction and adaptation. Some researchers have proposed that catastrophic events, possibly including cosmic impacts, may have played a role in the dramatic environmental changes that mark the transition from glacial to interglacial conditions. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests that a comet airburst or impact around 12,850 years ago triggered the Younger Dryas cold period, a sudden return to near-glacial conditions that lasted for over 1,000 years in the middle of what should have been a steady, warming trend. Proponents of this hypothesis argue that such an impact could have caused widespread fires, atmospheric changes, and environmental disruptions that contributed to megafaunal extinctions and the disappearance of Clovis culture in North America. The proposed evidence includes microscopic diamonds, magnetic spherules, and other materials that supporters claim are consistent with an extraterrestrial impact. They point to a layer of sediment found at sites across North America that appears to date to the beginning of the Younger Dryas period and contains unusual concentrations of materials that could have been produced by cosmic impact. However, the scientific community has largely rejected this hypothesis after repeated attempts to replicate the key evidence have failed. Independent researchers have been unable to confirm the presence of impact markers in sediments from the proposed time period, and many of the materials originally cited as evidence of cosmic impact have been reinterpreted as the products of normal terrestrial processes like wildfires, volcanic activity, or contamination from more recent sources. The controversy surrounding the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis illustrates how difficult it can be to understand the complex processes that shaped the end of the Ice Age. The transition from glacial to interglacial conditions involved interactions between climate systems, ocean currents, atmospheric chemistry, ice sheet dynamics, and biological processes that operated on different timescales and influenced each other in ways that we're still trying to unravel. What we do know is that the end of the Ice Age was not a simple, gradual process of warming and ice retreat. It was characterized by sudden reversals, rapid changes, and complex feedback loops that could transform entire continental landscapes within decades or even years. The Younger Dryas period itself, regardless of what caused it, demonstrates that climate systems can shift dramatically and unexpectedly, returning to near-glacial conditions even in the middle of a long-term warming trend. These rapid climate changes had profound impacts on the human societies that were trying to adapt to post-glacial conditions. The Younger Dryas cooling may have forced populations that had begun to settle in permanent villages to return to more mobile lifestyles, disrupted early agricultural experiments, and contributed to social and cultural changes that we're only beginning to understand through archaeological evidence. The evidence recovered from these ancient landscapes reveals something even more remarkable about Ice Age human societies. The stone tools found scattered across what was once Doggerland weren't crude implements hastily fashioned for immediate survival. They were sophisticated instruments crafted with remarkable skill and precision. Flint cobbles, radiolarites, and even precious opal had been transported from sources up to 80 miles away, suggesting trade networks and social connections that spanned vast territories during some of the harshest climatic conditions in human history. What's particularly fascinating about these tool assemblages is that they appear to represent the personal toolkit of individual expert hunters and gatherers. But here's where the story becomes almost touchingly human. Many of these tools were broken, partially damaged implements that by all practical logic should have been discarded and replaced. Yet they were carefully maintained, carried across great distances, and preserved with what can only be described as sentimental attachment. Researchers believe these ancient craftspeople held onto broken tools in the hope of recycling them, or perhaps because these objects carried emotional significance that transcended their practical utility. Think about what this tells us about the inner lives of Ice Age peoples. These weren't desperate survivors focused solely on immediate needs. These were individuals who formed emotional attachments to their possessions, who saw value in objects beyond their immediate function, who carried pieces of their past with them as they moved across landscapes that challenged every aspect of human endurance. The distances involved in obtaining raw materials reveals something equally profound about Ice Age social organization. Traveling 80 miles for quality stone in a world without roads, maps, or reliable weather patterns required not just individual courage, but sophisticated networks of knowledge sharing and mutual support. These expeditions would have involved multiple people, careful planning, and intimate understanding of seasonal conditions, wildlife patterns, and geographical landmarks across enormous territories. This level of social cooperation extended far beyond simple toolmaking. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed evidence of what can only be described as Ice Age art galleries, caves where our ancestors created some of the most moving and sophisticated artistic expressions in human history. Deep underground, protected from the harsh surface conditions, these galleries preserved paintings and engravings that speak to spiritual and aesthetic sensibilities we're only beginning to appreciate. The cave paintings at sites like Lascaux and Altamira weren't random decorations or simple hunting magic. They represent systematic artistic traditions that required specialized knowledge, careful preparation of pigments, and sophisticated understanding of how to use the natural contours of cave walls to create three-dimensional effects. Some of these paintings demonstrate such advanced techniques that modern artists struggle to replicate them using contemporary materials and methods. But what makes these artistic achievements even more remarkable is the context in which they were created. These weren't the leisure activities of people living in comfortable, stable communities. These were expressions of human creativity and spirituality produced by societies that faced constant challenges of survival in environments that tested every aspect of human adaptability. The time and energy devoted to creating these masterpieces had to be carved out from the demanding daily activities of finding food, maintaining shelter, and protecting communities from the dangers of Ice Age landscapes. The pigments used in cave paintings reveal another layer of sophistication in Ice Age human culture, creating the vivid reds, ochres, blacks, and yellows that still glow on cave walls after tens of thousands of years required detailed knowledge of mineral sources, chemical processes, and artistic techniques. Some pigments had to be heated to specific temperatures to achieve desired colors. Others required mixing with organic binders like animal fats or plant extracts to ensure they would adhere properly to stone surfaces. The preparation of these materials would have been a specialized craft, requiring years of training and experience. This suggests that Ice Age societies supported individuals who could devote significant portions of their time to artistic pursuits, indicating levels of social organization and resource management that allowed for specialization beyond the immediate necessities of survival. These weren't desperate bands of struggling survivors. These were communities sophisticated enough to support artists, craftspeople, and spiritual leaders who could dedicate themselves to activities that enriched the cultural life of their groups. The artistic themes found in Ice Age cave paintings also reveal complex relationships between humans and the natural world around them. The animals depicted aren't just random creatures that happen to share the landscape. They represent careful observations of animal behavior, seasonal patterns, and ecological relationships that demonstrate intimate knowledge of Ice Age ecosystems. Some paintings show animals in motion with such accuracy that modern zoologists can identify specific behavioral patterns and even seasonal conditions based on details like fur thickness and body posture. These artistic records provide us with information about Ice Age fauna that we could never obtain from fossil evidence alone. We can see how these ancient artists perceived the animals they lived alongside, which species were considered most important or spiritually significant, and how human communities understood their place within the broader web of Ice Age life. Some cave paintings even suggest that certain animals may have held totemic or spiritual significance that went far beyond their value as sources of food or materials. The locations chosen for these artistic galleries weren't random either. Many cave painting sites were positioned in acoustically sophisticated chambers where sounds would resonate and echo in ways that enhanced ceremonial activities. Recent research has revealed that some cave art was specifically positioned to take advantage of natural acoustic properties, suggesting that these galleries weren't just visual experiences, but multi-sensory ceremonial spaces where art, music, and spiritual practices combined to create powerful ritual environments. Archaeological evidence from these sites includes bone flutes, rattles, and other musical instruments that demonstrate the importance of sound in Ice Age spiritual practices. Some cave paintings are positioned in locations that would have been impossible to reach without artificial lighting, indicating that torchlit processions through dark underground passages were part of the ceremonial experience. The interplay between flickering firelight and painted animals on cave walls would have created moving, almost cinematic effects that brought these artistic creations to life in ways that we can barely imagine today. But the spiritual sophistication of Ice Age peoples extended beyond underground art galleries to encompass elaborate burial practices that reveal complex beliefs about death, afterlife, and social relationships. Some Ice Age burials include grave goods so elaborate and valuable that they suggest beliefs in continued existence after death, where individuals would need tools, ornaments, and provisions for journeys into spiritual realms. The famous burial at Sungir in Russia included individuals adorned with thousands of mammoth ivory beads, elaborate headdresses, and spears carved from mammoth tusks. The amount of time and skilled labor required to create these burial goods would have represented months or even years of work by expert craftspeople. This wasn't just respect for the dead. This was evidence of social systems sophisticated enough to support long-term projects that served spiritual rather than immediate practical purposes. Some Ice Age burials also reveal evidence of medical knowledge and social care that challenges stereotypes about prehistoric brutality. Skeletal remains show evidence of healed fractures, amputations that were performed with sufficient skill that individuals survived for years afterward, and care for disabled community members who would have required ongoing support to survive in harsh Ice Age conditions. These aren't the patterns we would expect from societies focused solely on survival of the fittest. These are communities that valued individual members enough to invest significant resources in their care and recovery. The medical knowledge demonstrated in Ice Age skeletal remains includes evidence of surgical procedures, herbal treatments, and therapeutic practices that require detailed understanding of human anatomy and healing processes. Some individuals show evidence of trepanation, the surgical removal of portions of skull bone, performed with sufficient skill that patients survived the procedures and lived for years afterward. The tools and techniques required for such operations would have represented sophisticated medical traditions passed down through generations of skilled practitioners. These medical traditions were likely intertwined with spiritual beliefs about healing, illness, and the relationship between physical and spiritual well-being. The same individuals who created cave art and maintained ritual sites may have also served as healers and medical practitioners for their communities. The integration of artistic, spiritual, and medical knowledge suggests that Ice Age societies valued individuals who could master multiple specialized skills and serve various roles within their communities. The evidence for Ice Age medical knowledge extends beyond surgical procedures to include sophisticated understanding of plant medicines and therapeutic treatments. Pollen analysis from some Ice Age sites has revealed the presence of plants with known medicinal properties, suggesting that these ancient peoples had detailed knowledge of herbal remedies and their applications. Some of these plant medicines would have had to be gathered from distant locations or stored carefully to maintain their potency through harsh winter conditions. This pharmaceutical knowledge would have been particularly crucial during Ice Age conditions, when communities might be isolated for months at a time by severe weather or dangerous travel conditions. The ability to treat injuries, infections, and illnesses using locally available or carefully stored medicinal resources could mean the difference between survival and death for entire communities during extended periods of isolation. The social implications of this medical knowledge are profound. Communities that could successfully treat injuries and illnesses would have had significant advantages in terms of survival and population growth. But maintaining this knowledge required social systems that valued learning, teaching, and the preservation of specialized information across generations. This suggests educational traditions and mentorship relationships that allowed complex bodies of knowledge to be transmitted from experienced practitioners to younger learners. The integration of medical, artistic, and spiritual knowledge in Ice Age societies also reveals something important about how these communities understood the relationship between different types of expertise. Rather than viewing these as separate, unrelated fields, Ice Age peoples appear to have recognized connections between healing, creativity, and spiritual practice that modern societies have largely forgotten. The same individuals who painted animals on cave walls may have also prepared medicines from those same animals or plants, creating holistic systems of knowledge that addressed multiple aspects of human experience. This holistic approach to knowledge and expertise may have been one of the key factors that allowed Ice Age human societies to not just survive, but thrive in some of the most challenging environmental conditions our species has ever faced. By integrating practical skills with artistic expression and spiritual understanding, these communities created resilient cultural systems that could adapt to changing conditions while maintaining essential knowledge and social cohesion. The archaeological record suggests that these integrated knowledge systems were maintained across vast geographical areas and extended periods of time. Similar artistic styles, tool technologies, and burial practices appear at sites separated by thousands of miles and hundreds of years, indicating that Ice Age peoples maintained communication networks and cultural exchanges that spanned continental distances. This wasn't isolated survival by scattered bands. This was coordinated cultural development by interconnected societies that shared knowledge, resources, and innovations across enormous territories. The mechanisms that allowed for this cultural coordination during Ice Age conditions remain somewhat mysterious, but they clearly involved more than simple trade relationships or occasional contact between neighboring groups. The consistency of certain cultural practices across such vast areas suggests systematic efforts to maintain connections and share important innovations, even when direct travel would have been difficult or dangerous due to climate conditions or geographical barriers. Recent genetic studies of Ice Age human remains have provided additional evidence for these long-distance connections by revealing patterns of population movement and intermixing that demonstrate extensive mobility and cultural exchange during periods we once thought were characterized by isolation and fragmentation. DNA analysis shows that Ice Age peoples maintained genetic diversity through contact networks that prevented the kind of inbreeding and genetic bottlenecks that would have occurred in truly isolated populations. These genetic studies also reveal something remarkable about the demographic resilience of Ice Age human populations. Despite facing some of the most challenging environmental conditions in human history, these communities maintained population sizes and genetic diversity that allowed them not just to survive, but to continue cultural and technological development that laid the foundation for everything that followed in human history. The story emerging from Ice Age archaeological sites isn't one of desperate survival against overwhelming odds. It's a story of human creativity, adaptability, and social cooperation that allowed our ancestors to not just endure, but to flourish in conditions that would challenge even modern technological societies. They created art that still moves us today, developed medical knowledge that saved lives, maintained spiritual traditions that provided meaning and purpose, and built social networks that spanned continents and lasted for thousands of years. As we continue to uncover evidence of Ice Age human achievement, we're forced to reconsider not just what these ancient peoples accomplished, but what their achievements tell us about human nature itself. The creativity, compassion, and cooperation revealed in Ice Age archaeological sites suggest that these qualities aren't recent developments in human evolution, but fundamental aspects of what it means to be human that have been expressed throughout our species' history, even under the most challenging circumstances imaginable. The discovery of sophisticated Ice Age technologies challenges everything we thought we knew about prehistoric human capabilities. But perhaps nowhere is this more evident than in the remarkable finds emerging from Moravia in the Czech Republic, where archaeologists have uncovered what can only be described as a master craftsman's personal collection from over 30,000 years ago. Carbon dating revealed that these artifacts were created between 29,500 and 30,250 years old, placing them squarely within the time when the Gravettian culture flourished across Ice Age Europe. But what makes this discovery truly extraordinary isn't just the age of these tools, it's the sophistication of their creation and the distances their makers travelled to obtain the finest materials. The raw materials used in these tools came from sources scattered across a landscape spanning 80 miles in every direction. Flint cobbles, radiolarites, and even precious opal were carefully selected and transported across territories that would have required weeks of dangerous travel through landscapes dominated by glacial conditions. This wasn't opportunistic use of whatever materials happened to be available nearby. This was deliberate, planned procurement of specific stone types, chosen for their particular qualities and working properties. Think about what this level of material selection reveals about Ice Age knowledge systems. These craftspeople understood the molecular structure of different stones, how various minerals would respond to pressure and heat, which materials would hold the sharpest edges, and which would provide the most durable working surfaces. They had developed what we can only call a science of stone, passed down through generations of master toolmakers who understood their materials at a level that rivals modern geological knowledge. But here's where the story becomes almost heartbreakingly human. Among this master craftsman's toolkit were numerous broken and partially damaged pieces, tools that had clearly outlived their primary usefulness, but were still carefully maintained and carried across vast distances. Researchers believe this ancient artisan kept these broken implements either in hopes of eventually recycling them, or perhaps because they held sentimental value that transcended their practical function. Imagine the story each broken tool might tell. Perhaps that chipped blade was used to process the hide of the first mammoth this hunter brought down as a young apprentice. Maybe that fractured scraper had belonged to a beloved mentor whose memory lived on in the worn stone. These weren't just utilitarian objects. They were repositories of personal history, carriers of emotional significance that made them worth preserving, even when their practical value had diminished. This emotional attachment to tools and possessions reveals something profound about the inner lives of Ice Age peoples. Far from being focused solely on immediate survival needs, these were individuals capable of forming complex emotional relationships with their material world. They understood beauty, valued craftsmanship, and maintained connections to their personal histories through objects that carried meaning beyond their immediate utility. The sophistication extends beyond individual craftsmanship to reveal extensive trade networks that connected Ice Age communities across enormous geographical areas. The fact that materials from sources 80 miles apart could end up in a single toolkit suggests not just individual travel, but systematic exchange relationships that allowed specialized resources to flow between distant communities. These weren't isolated bands struggling for survival in harsh conditions. These were interconnected societies that maintained communication and cooperation across territories that would challenge modern transportation systems. Recent discoveries in other parts of Europe have revealed similar patterns of long-distance material procurement and sophisticated craftsmanship. In France, archaeologists have found evidence of ochre pigments that were transported over 200 miles from their sources to cave painting sites. In Spain, researchers have uncovered shell beads made from marine species that had to be carried over 100 miles inland from coastal collection areas. These patterns point to something remarkable about Ice Age social organization. Communities were maintaining contact and cooperation across distances that would have required coordinated planning and mutual support. The individuals who made these long journeys to obtain specialized materials weren't traveling alone through dangerous territories. They were part of social networks that provided protection, guidance, essential resource, and reciprocal support for these procurement expeditions. The knowledge required for these journeys was itself a form of sophisticated technology. Travelers needed detailed understanding of seasonal weather patterns, wildlife migration routes, river crossing points, shelter locations, and navigation landmarks across territories spanning hundreds of miles. This geographical knowledge had to be maintained and transmitted across generations, suggesting educational systems and memory traditions that preserved essential information for community survival and prosperity. But the technological sophistication of Ice Age peoples extended far beyond stone tool production and resource procurement. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed evidence of complex organic technologies that demonstrate mastery of materials and processes that we're only beginning to appreciate. Textile fragments preserved in exceptional circumstances show evidence of sophisticated weaving techniques, dye processes, and fiber preparation methods that require detailed knowledge of plant and animal materials. The creation of textiles during Ice Age conditions would have been particularly challenging and therefore particularly valuable. Plant fibers had to be gathered during specific seasons, processed using techniques that required careful timing and environmental control, and then worked into finished products using tools and methods that left minimal archaeological traces. The fact that Ice Age peoples were producing textiles sophisticated enough to survive in archaeological contexts suggests that much more extensive textile production was occurring using materials and methods that haven't been preserved in the archaeological record. Animal hide processing during the Ice Age also demonstrates remarkable technological sophistication. The preservation of leather goods in frozen contexts reveals tanning and preparation techniques that produce materials of exceptional quality and durability. Some Ice Age leather artifacts show evidence of processing methods that required precise control of temperature, humidity, and chemical treatments using organic materials that had to be gathered, prepared, and applied with expert knowledge of their properties and effects. The tools used for hide processing were themselves marvels of Ice Age engineering. Scrapers, awls, and cutting implements had to be designed and manufactured to perform specific functions in the complex process of transforming animal skins into finished leather goods. The precision required for these tools demanded not just skilled craftsmanship, but detailed understanding of how different tool geometries would perform various processing tasks. Archaeological evidence suggests that different communities specialized in different aspects of leather production, creating trade relationships where raw hides might be processed by expert tanners in one location and then distributed to other communities where specialized craftspeople would create finished goods like clothing, containers, or shelter materials. This kind of production specialization requires social organization sophisticated enough to coordinate resource flows and maintain quality standards across multiple communities and production stages. The complexity of Ice Age material culture extends to wooden technologies that we're only beginning to understand through exceptional preservation in waterlogged or frozen contexts. Wooden spear shafts, tool handles, and structural elements reveal sophisticated understanding of wood properties, seasoning techniques, and joinery methods that produced functional implements capable of withstanding the stresses of Ice Age use conditions. Some wooden artifacts show evidence of heat treatment and other processing techniques that modified the natural properties of wood to enhance its performance for specific applications. The knowledge required for these treatments would have included understanding of how different wood species respond to various temperature and humidity conditions, as well as the timing and techniques needed to achieve desired modifications without damaging the material. The production of wooden implements also required sophisticated tool technologies for cutting, shaping, and finishing operations. Stone tools used for woodworking had to be designed and manufactured with geometries optimized for specific cutting and shaping tasks. The precision required for these woodworking tools demonstrates advanced understanding of how tool design affects performance and efficiency in material processing operations. Archaeological evidence from some Ice Age sites reveals what can only be described as workshops, where specialized craftspeople produce tools and implements for use by broader communities. These production areas show evidence of organized workspaces, specialized toolsets, and waste materials that indicate systematic manufacturing processes rather than ad hoc production by individuals for their immediate personal needs. The organization of these workshops suggests social systems that could support specialized craftspeople who devoted significant portions of their time to tool production rather than direct subsistence activities. This kind of economic specialization requires community organization sophisticated enough to ensure that specialist craftspeople receive food, shelter, and other necessities in exchange for their specialized production activities. Recent discoveries have also revealed evidence of what we might call Ice Age engineering projects that required coordinated community effort and sophisticated planning. Large-scale hunting installations like the reindeer driving systems found in Scandinavia involved construction of stone alignments, wooden barriers, and pit traps that required surveying, planning, and construction techniques involving multiple workers over extended time periods. These hunting installations weren't simple expedients constructed for immediate use. They were carefully planned engineering projects designed to function effectively over multiple hunting seasons and to be maintained and modified as needed. The level of planning required for these installations demonstrates sophisticated understanding of animal behavior, landscape features, and construction techniques that could produce durable, effective hunting infrastructure. The maintenance of these hunting installations also reveals social systems capable of long-term project coordination. Communities had to organize maintenance and seasonal labor for initial construction, ongoing preparation activities. They had to maintain knowledge about installation operation and coordinate hunting activities to make effective use of these complex systems. Archaeological evidence suggests that some of these hunting installations were used continuously for hundreds or even thousands of years, requiring social institutions capable of maintaining technical knowledge and operational coordination across many generations. This kin continuity demonstrates of long-term institutional social organization as sophisticated as anything found in later agricultural societies. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Ice Age technological achievement was the development of what we might call environmental technologies, systematic methods for managing and modifying local environments to enhance their productivity and habitability. Evidence from some Ice Age sites suggests that communities were using controlled burning, selective harvesting, and other landscape management techniques to enhance the productivity of local plant and animal resources. These environmental management practices require detailed ecological knowledge about how different species respond to various management interventions, as well as long-term planning capabilities that could coordinate management activities across seasonal and annual cycles. The development of effective environmental management systems would have required generations of experimentation, observation, and knowledge accumulation. Some archaeological sites show evidence of what appear to be managed landscapes, where human activities had systematically modified local plant communities to enhance the availability of useful species. These modifications would have required not just understanding of individual plant species, but comprehension of ecological relationships and succession patterns that determine how plant communities respond to different management practices. The sophistication of Ice Age environmental management is perhaps most evident in sites where communities appear to have maintained productive landscapes over extended periods despite challenging climate conditions. The ability to sustain productive resource bases during periods of climate instability demonstrates environmental knowledge and management capabilities that rival those of modern ecological science. Archaeological evidence from these managed landscapes reveals that Ice Age peoples were capable of what we might call sustainable resource management, maintaining productive systems over long periods without degrading the environmental base that supported their communities. This kind of sustainable management requires understanding of ecological limits and feedback systems that prevent overexploitation of essential resources. The development of sustainable management practices during Ice Age conditions was particularly challenging because climate instability meant that environmental conditions were constantly changing. Management systems had to be flexible enough to adapt to changing conditions while maintaining essential resource productivity. This required not just technical knowledge, but social institutions capable of modifying management practices in response to environmental feedback. Recent research has begun to reveal that Ice Age peoples may have been among the first humans to develop systematic approaches to what we now call adaptive management, continuously modifying their practices based on monitoring of environmental conditions and resource productivity. This kind of adaptive management requires social learning systems capable of incorporating new information and modifying established practices when conditions change. The evidence for Ice Age adaptive management comes from archaeological sites that show systematic changes in resource use patterns over time, suggesting that communities were monitoring resource availability and adjusting their harvesting practices to maintain sustainable yields. These adjustments weren't random responses to immediate shortages, but systematic modifications based on understanding of how different harvesting intensities affect long-term resource availability. The social institutions required for adaptive management include not just technical knowledge systems, but social mechanisms for making collective decisions about resource use and for implementing and enforcing management decisions across community members. Archaeological evidence suggests that Ice Age communities developed governance systems sophisticated enough to coordinate complex resource management decisions involving multiple resource types and competing uses. The governance systems revealed in Ice Age archaeological sites include evidence of what appear to be specialized roles for individuals responsible for monitoring resource conditions, making management recommendations, and coordinating implementation of management decisions. These specialized roles suggest social differentiation based on expertise and responsibility, rather than simple hierarchy based on age or physical dominance. The complexity of Ice Age social organization is perhaps most evident in sites that show evidence of coordinated activities involving multiple communities working together on large-scale projects or resource management activities. These multi-community coordination efforts required communication systems, decision-making processes, and conflict resolution mechanisms capable of managing cooperation between groups that might otherwise compete for the same resources. Archaeological evidence for multi-community cooperation includes sites where tool technologies, artistic styles, and resource use patterns show evidence of shared knowledge systems that extended across multiple communities over vast geographical areas. The maintenance of these shared knowledge systems required social institutions capable of facilitating information exchange and maintaining cultural continuity across communities that might have direct contact only seasonally or intermittently. The sophistication of Ice Age social institutions becomes even more remarkable when we consider that these systems had to function effectively under conditions of climate instability that would have challenged even modern organizational systems. Ice Age communities had to maintain social cooperation and effective resource management during periods when environmental conditions were changing rapidly and unpredictably. The resilience of Ice Age social systems is evident in archaeological sites that show continuous occupation or repeated use over thousands of years, despite dramatic climate changes. The ability to maintain effective community organization through major environmental transitions demonstrates social adaptability and institutional flexibility that allowed these communities to survive and thrive, despite challenges that would have overwhelmed less sophisticated social systems. Recent archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new evidence of Ice Age technological and social sophistication, forcing us to continuously revise our understanding of what these ancient peoples achieved. Each new discovery adds another piece to a picture of human societies that were far more complex, capable, and successful than we previously imagined possible under Ice Age conditions. The emerging picture of Ice Age humanity reveals people who were not just surviving in harsh conditions, but creating rich, complex cultures that successfully addressed the challenges of their environments while maintaining social systems sophisticated enough to support technological innovation, artistic achievement, and sustainable resource management. These weren't primitive societies waiting for the development of agriculture to begin real civilization. These were fully realized human cultures that achieved remarkable things under some of the most challenging conditions our species has ever faced. As we continue to uncover evidence of Ice Age achievement, we're forced to reconsider not just what these ancient peoples accomplished, but what their achievements tell us about human potential under challenging circumstances. The creativity, cooperation, and resilience revealed in Ice Age archaeological sites suggest that these qualities have been fundamental aspects of human nature throughout our species' history, expressed even under conditions that would test the limits of human adaptability. The story of Ice Age humanity isn't just about survival against overwhelming odds. It's about human societies that found ways to thrive, create, and build lasting institutions, even in the face of environmental challenges that would overwhelm modern technological societies. Their achievements remind us that human ingenuity, cooperation, and resilience have deep roots in our species' history. Qualities that have allowed us to not just survive, but to flourish in every environment we've encountered. The secrets emerging from Ice Age archaeological sites continue to reveal new dimensions of human achievement and potential. Each discovery adds to our understanding of what it means to be human, showing us that the qualities we value most in our species creativity, compassion, cooperation, and resilience have been part of human nature for tens of thousands of years, expressed in remarkable ways by people who face challenges we can barely imagine. As the ice continues to melt and reveal more secrets from our deep past, we can expect to discover even more evidence of Ice Age human achievement. The story of these remarkable people is far from complete, and each new discovery promises to add new chapters to our understanding of human history and human potential. The dark secrets of the lost Ice Age world are slowly coming to light, revealing not a story of primitive struggle, but a testament to human ingenuity, creativity, and resilience that continues to inspire us today. The mysteries hidden beneath the ice extend far beyond individual artifacts and ancient settlements. They reveal entire chapters of human experience that challenge our most fundamental assumptions about civilization itself. As we peer deeper into the frozen archives of prehistory, we discover that the boundaries between what we call primitive and advanced become increasingly meaningless. Consider the remarkable discovery made in the permafrost of Siberia, where researchers uncovered not just preserved mammoth remains, but an entire ecosystem frozen in time. Within the stomach contents of these magnificent creatures, scientists found seeds, pollen, and plant fragments that paint a picture of landscapes so rich and diverse they seem almost mythical by today's standards. These weren't the barren tundra expanses we might imagine. They were productive grasslands teeming with life, supporting not just massive herbivores, but complex food webs that sustain some of the most spectacular predators ever to walk the earth. The mammoth steppe, as researchers now call it, stretched from Western Europe across Siberia to Alaska and beyond. This vast grassland ecosystem was maintained through the grazing and trampling of enormous herds of herbivores whose very presence shaped the landscape around them. Mammoths, woolly rhinoceros, giant bison, and wild horses moved across these plains in numbers that would have darkened the horizon, their massive forms creating a living force that kept forests at bay and maintained the open grasslands that supported their continued existence. But the mammoth steppe was more than just a feeding ground for large animals. It was a carbon sink of enormous proportions, storing vast quantities of carbon in its deep, fertile soils. The root systems of steppe grasses extended deep into the permafrost, creating a biological mechanism for capturing atmospheric carbon that may have played a crucial role in regulating global climate patterns during the Ice Age. Recent research suggests that the loss of this ecosystem when the megafauna disappeared may have actually contributed to the warming that characterized the end of the Ice Age. Without the constant grazing and trampling that maintained the grasslands, forests, and wetlands expanded across former steppe regions. These new ecosystems reflected less sunlight and stored less carbon in their soils than the grasslands they replaced, potentially accelerating the climate changes that were already underway. The implications are staggering. The extinction of Ice Age megafauna may not have been simply a consequence of climate change, but actually a contributing factor to the environmental transformations that shaped the world we know today. The massive herbivores that dominated Ice Age landscapes weren't just inhabitants of their ecosystems. They were ecosystem engineers whose very presence maintained environmental conditions that supported their continued existence. This revelation forces us to reconsider the relationship between large animals and their environments in ways that have profound implications for our understanding of both past and present ecological systems. The megafauna weren't just adapted to Ice Age conditions, they were actively creating and maintaining those conditions through their behavior and ecological impact. Archaeological evidence from sites across the mammoth steppe reveals that human communities were intimately connected to these ecosystem dynamics. Rather than simply hunting the large animals that shared their landscapes, Ice Age peoples developed sophisticated understanding of how these creatures moved, fed, and interacted with their environments. They learned to predict seasonal migrations, to anticipate behavioral patterns, and to position themselves within the complex ecological relationships that defined mammoth steppe communities. Some of the most remarkable evidence for this ecological integration comes from sites where human artifacts are found in direct association with mammoth remains. These aren't just kill sites where hunters brought down individual animals. They're complex archaeological deposits that suggest long-term relationships between human communities and mammoth herds that involved seasonal interaction, resource sharing, and mutual adaptation. At Kostienki in Russia, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of what can only be described as mammoth-human communities, sites where human settlements were built using mammoth bones as structural materials, and where human activities were clearly integrated with mammoth behavior patterns over extended periods. These weren't temporary hunting camps. They were permanent settlements that functioned as part of larger mammoth steppe ecosystems. The mammoth bone houses discovered at these sites represent architectural achievements that rival anything produced by later agricultural societies. Massive mammoth skulls served as foundation elements, while intricately arranged leg bones and ribs created walls and roofing systems that could withstand the fierce winds and extreme temperatures of Ice Age winters. The construction of these structures required not just engineering skill, but detailed understanding of mammoth anatomy and bone properties that allowed builders to select and arrange skeletal elements for maximum structural integrity. But these weren't just practical shelters built from available materials. The arrangement of bones in many of these structures shows clear evidence of artistic and spiritual considerations that transformed functional buildings into sacred spaces. Mammoth skulls were positioned to face specific directions, often aligned with astronomical phenomena or landscape features that held spiritual significance. The interior spaces were designed to accommodate ceremonial activities, with central hearths positioned to create optimal acoustic and lighting conditions for ritual gatherings. The spiritual significance of mammoths in Ice Age human cultures is evident in cave paintings and portable art objects found across Europe and Asia. These massive creatures appear in artistic contexts that suggest they were more than just sources of food and materials. They were spiritual beings that occupied central places in Ice Age cosmologies and belief systems. Some cave paintings show mammoths in contexts that can only be interpreted as ceremonial or mythological. They're depicted alongside human figures in scenes that suggest ritual interactions, spiritual communications, or mythological narratives that explain the relationship between humans and these magnificent creatures. The artistic treatment of mammoths in these contexts reveals emotional and spiritual connections that transcended simple predator-prey relationships. The portable art objects carved from mammoth ivory demonstrate even more intimate spiritual connections between humans and these animals. Tiny mammoth figurines, carved with extraordinary attention to anatomical detail, have been found at sites across Ice Age Europe. These aren't crude representations or simple toys. They're sophisticated artistic expressions that required hundreds of hours of skilled carving to create. The level of detail in these ivory carvings reveals intimate knowledge of mammoth anatomy and behavior that could only have been gained through close, sustained observation. Every wrinkle of skin, every curve of tusk, every proportion of body parts is rendered with precision that demonstrates not just artistic skill, but deep familiarity with living mammoths. These carvings weren't created from memory or imagination. They were portraits of known individuals, artistic tributes to specific animals that held special significance for their creators. Recent analysis of mammoth ivory artifacts has revealed that many were made from tusks obtained from animals that died natural deaths rather than being hunted. The isotopic signatures in the ivory show that these tusks came from mammoths that lived full lifespans and died of old age or disease, suggesting that Ice Age peoples maintained relationships with mammoth herds that involved caring for sick or elderly animals, rather than simply exploiting them as resources. This evidence points to relationships between humans and mammoths that were far more complex and nuanced than simple hunting relationships. Some researchers have suggested that Ice Age peoples may have practiced a form of mammoth husbandry, maintaining semi-domestic relationships with mammoth herds that involved mutual benefit and long-term cooperation rather than predation. The idea of mammoth domestication during the Ice Age remains controversial, but archaeological evidence continues to accumulate that suggests at least some human communities maintained relationships with mammoth populations that involved elements of care, protection, and mutual benefit. Sites have been found where mammoth remains show evidence of medical treatment for injuries, suggesting that humans were caring for wounded animals rather than simply abandoning them. Other sites contain mammoth remains that show evidence of artificial feeding, with plant materials that don't occur naturally in the local environment, but would have required human transport and provision. These findings suggest that some human communities were supplementing the diets of mammoth herds during harsh winter conditions when natural forage was scarce. The implications of these discoveries extend far beyond our understanding of human-animal relationships during the Ice Age. They suggest that the boundary between wild and domestic, between hunter and herder, may have been far more fluid in prehistoric societies than we previously imagined. The relationships between Ice Age peoples and the megafauna that shared their landscapes may have included elements of partnership and cooperation that challenge our assumptions about the nature of human relationships with the natural world. But the story becomes even more complex when we consider the role that climate change played in disrupting these ancient partnerships. As the Ice Age came to an end and temperatures began to rise, the mammoth steppe ecosystem that had supported both human communities and megafauna herds for thousands of years began to fragment and disappear. The warming climate didn't just affect individual species, it fundamentally altered the ecological relationships that had sustained entire communities of humans and animals for millennia. As forests expanded into former grassland areas and sea levels rose to flood coastal plains, the geographical connections that allowed mammoth herds to move seasonally between different feeding areas were severed. Mammoth populations that had survived previous climate fluctuations by migrating to more suitable habitats found themselves trapped in isolated fragments of suitable habitat, with no way to reach other areas when local conditions became unfavorable. The same rising sea levels that flooded human settlements like Doggerland also cut off the land bridges that mammoth herds had used for seasonal migrations between continents. The genetic evidence preserved in mammoth remains tells a story of increasing isolation and inbreeding as populations became cut off from one another. The final mammoth populations, confined to islands like Wrangel Island off the coast of Siberia, show clear genetic signatures of the kind of inbreeding depression that occurs when small populations are isolated for extended periods without genetic input from other groups. But even as mammoth populations declined and eventually disappeared, the human communities that had lived alongside them for thousands of years faced their own challenges, adapting to rapidly changing environmental conditions. The loss of the megafauna that had provided not just food and materials, but spiritual meaning and cultural identity, represented a crisis that went far beyond simple resource scarcity. Archaeological evidence from the end of the Ice Age shows dramatic changes in human settlement patterns, tool technologies, and cultural practices that suggest profound social and spiritual disruptions as communities struggled to adapt to landscapes that no longer supported the animals and ecosystems that had defined their way of life for countless generations. Some human populations appear to have followed retreating mammoth herds northward as suitable habitat contracted, maintaining their traditional relationships with these animals as long as possible. Other communities adapted by shifting their focus to smaller game animals and developing new hunting technologies suited to forested rather than grassland environments. But perhaps the most significant adaptation was the development of new spiritual and cultural systems that could provide meaning and identity in landscapes that no longer contained the megafauna that had occupied central places in Ice Age cosmologies. The cave paintings and carved figurines that celebrated mammoth spirits gave way to new artistic traditions focused on smaller animals and different kinds of spiritual relationships. Some researchers have suggested that the trauma of megafauna extinction may have contributed to the development of agricultural systems as human communities sought new ways to ensure reliable food sources in landscapes that could no longer support the massive herds of animals that had sustained their ancestors. The shift from hunting and gathering to farming may have been driven not just by population pressure or climate change, but by the psychological and spiritual need to regain some measure of control over food production in a world that had become fundamentally unpredictable. The end of the mammoth steppe ecosystem represents one of the most dramatic ecological transformations in Earth's recent history. But it also marks a crucial turning point in human cultural evolution. The communities that survived this transition were those that proved most capable of adapting their technologies, social organizations, and belief systems to radically different environmental conditions. The innovations that allowed some human populations to thrive in post-glacial environments built directly upon the sophisticated knowledge systems that had been developed during the Ice Age. The understanding of plant ecology that had enabled mammoth steppe peoples to manage their landscapes became the foundation for early agricultural systems. The social organizations that had coordinated mammoth hunting expeditions evolved into the complex societies that would eventually build the first cities and states. Even the spiritual traditions that had celebrated the mammoth as a sacred being found new expression in agricultural fertility cults that honored the power of the earth to produce life and sustenance. The continuity between Ice Age and post-glacial spiritual systems suggests that the transition from hunting to farming wasn't just a technological shift, but a cultural transformation that preserved essential elements of human meaning-making while adapting them to new environmental conditions. Recent discoveries in underwater archaeology have revealed that this cultural continuity extended across the dramatic landscape, changes that occurred as ice sheets melted and sea levels rose. Sites that are now submerged beneath coastal waters contain evidence of cultural practices and technological innovations that bridge the gap between Ice Age and post-glacial societies. At Atlit Yam, a submerged site off the coast of Israel, archaeologists have discovered a 9,000-year-old village that shows clear evidence of the transition from hunting and gathering to early agriculture. The site contains the remains of houses, storage facilities, and ritual installations that demonstrate sophisticated social organization during the crucial period when human communities were adapting to post-glacial environmental conditions. What makes Atlit Yam particularly significant is evidence that the community was practicing a mixed economy that combined traditional hunting and gathering with early experiments in plant cultivation and animal domestication. Rather than representing a sudden shift from one way of life to another, the site reveals a gradual transition that allowed communities to maintain cultural continuity while adapting to changing environmental conditions. The ritual installations at Atlit Yam include a stone circle surrounding a freshwater spring that appears to have been used for ceremonial purposes related to water worship. The positioning of the stones and the artifacts found in association with the installation suggests spiritual practices that honored the life-giving properties of fresh water, perhaps reflecting adaptations of earlier spiritual traditions that had celebrated other aspects of the natural world. Similar patterns of cultural continuity and adaptation appear at underwater sites around the world, suggesting that the transition from Ice Age to post-glacial societies was characterized not by cultural collapse and replacement, but by sophisticated processes of adaptation that preserved essential elements of human knowledge and meaning, while modifying them to fit new environmental realities. The preservation of these transitional sites in underwater contexts provides us with unprecedented opportunities to understand how human societies navigated one of the most dramatic environmental transitions in our species' history. The organic materials preserved in underwater sites include evidence of textile production, woodworking, and other technologies that rarely survive in terrestrial archaeological contexts. At the underwater site of Pavlopetri in Greece, archaeologists have discovered evidence of urban planning and architectural sophistication that dates back over 5,000 years. The site contains streets, buildings, and public spaces that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of hydraulic engineering, drainage systems, and urban organization that built directly upon knowledge systems developed during earlier periods. The continuity between Ice Age innovations and later technological developments is perhaps most evident in the sophisticated water management systems found at sites like Pavlopetri. The ability to control and direct water flow for urban planning purposes required understanding of hydraulic principles that may have been first developed by Ice Age communities managing seasonal flooding and water availability in mammoth steppe environments. But the underwater archaeological sites also reveal evidence of cultural innovations that emerged specifically from the challenges of adapting to rising sea levels and changing coastal environments. Communities that had lived on stable coastlines for thousands of years were forced to develop new technologies and social organizations that could cope with rapidly changing environmental conditions. Some underwater sites show evidence of what can only be described as amphibious settlements, communities that were designed to function both on land and in shallow water environments as sea levels fluctuated. These settlements required architectural innovations, boat technologies, and social organizations that could maintain community cohesion despite constantly changing environmental conditions. The boat technologies preserved at underwater sites demonstrate remarkable sophistication in design and construction that allowed communities to maintain connections and trade relationships despite increasing distances between settlements as sea levels rose. Some of the preserved boats show evidence of construction techniques that required detailed understanding of wood properties, joinery methods, and hydrodynamic principles that rival modern boat-building knowledge. The social organizations that developed to manage these amphibious communities had to be flexible enough to adapt to changing environmental conditions while maintaining the stability and cooperation necessary for community survival. Archaeological evidence suggests that these communities developed governance systems that could coordinate resource management and decision-making across multiple settlements that might be connected by water rather than land. The complexity of these adaptive social systems becomes even more remarkable when we consider that they had to function during periods of rapid environmental change that would have challenged even modern organizational capabilities. The communities that survived the transition from Ice Age to post-glacial conditions were those that proved most capable of maintaining social cooperation and effective resource management despite constantly changing environmental conditions. Recent research has begun to reveal that the social innovations developed by these transitional communities may have provided the organizational foundations for the complex societies that would eventually emerge in river valleys like Mesopotamia and the Nile. The ability to coordinate large-scale construction projects, manage complex resource flows, and maintain social cohesion across diverse populations may have been first developed by coastal communities adapting to post-glacial environmental changes. The underwater archaeological sites continue to yield new evidence of the sophistication and adaptability of these transitional societies. Each discovery adds to our understanding of how human communities navigated one of the most challenging periods in our species' history, maintaining cultural continuity while developing the innovations that would eventually lead to the complex civilizations that dominate historical records. But perhaps the most profound revelation emerging from these underwater sites is evidence that the transition from Ice Age to post-glacial societies wasn't characterized by cultural decline or simplification, but by continued innovation and increasing complexity. The communities that adapted to post-glacial conditions didn't just survive environmental challenges, they used those challenges as opportunities for cultural and technological development that laid the groundwork for everything that followed in human history. The story told by underwater archaeology sites reveals human societies that were remarkably resilient and creative in the face of environmental challenges that would test the limits of modern technological capabilities. The innovations they developed for coping with rising sea levels, changing coastlines, and disrupted ecosystems demonstrate human ingenuity and adaptability that continues to inspire solutions for contemporary environmental challenges. As we continue to explore these underwater archaeological sites, we're discovering that the secrets of the lost Ice Age world extend far beyond the frozen landscapes and extinct megafauna that capture our imagination. The real secrets lie in the human communities that not only survived some of the most dramatic environmental changes in Earth's recent history, but used those experiences to develop cultural and technological innovations that continue to influence human societies today. The dark secrets of the lost Ice Age world aren't really dark at all. They're illuminating revelations about human creativity, adaptability, and resilience that remind us that our species has always found ways to thrive in the face of environmental challenges. The people who lived through the end of the Ice Age and the dramatic environmental changes that followed weren't victims of circumstances beyond their control. They were active agents of cultural and technological innovation who shaped the world we inhabit today through their responses to the challenges they faced. Their story continues to unfold as new archaeological discoveries emerge from melting ice and underwater excavations. Each artifact, each preserved settlement, each piece of evidence adds to our understanding of what it means to be human in the face of environmental change. The secrets of the lost Ice Age world are really secrets about ourselves, about the qualities that have allowed our species to not just survive, but to flourish throughout our long and remarkable history on this planet. As the night grows deeper and these ancient stories settle into your consciousness, remember that you carry within you the same creativity, adaptability, and resilience that allowed your Ice Age ancestors to build magnificent cultures in the face of challenges we can barely imagine. Their achievements aren't just historical curiosities, they're reminders of human potential that continues to live on in each of us, waiting to be expressed whenever we face our own moments of challenge and change. The ice continues to melt, the seas continue to reveal their hidden treasures, and the secrets of our deep past continue to emerge from their long sleep. But the most important secrets aren't buried in the ground or frozen in the ice. They're alive in the human spirit that refuses to surrender in the face of adversity, that finds ways to create beauty and meaning even in the harshest conditions, and that continues to discover new possibilities for flourishing no matter what challenges the future may bring. The frozen breath of the ancient world carries whispers of technologies that challenge everything we thought we knew about the progression of human innovation. Deep within the archaeological record, researchers have uncovered evidence of Ice Age engineering projects that required not just individual brilliance, but coordinated community efforts spanning generations. These weren't simple survival adaptations, but sophisticated systems that demonstrate planning, precision, and knowledge that rivals modern understanding. In the highlands of Armenia, archaeologists have discovered what can only be described as Ice Age observatories, carefully positioned stone arrangements that tracked celestial movements with remarkable accuracy. These weren't random collections of rocks arranged by chance. They were precisely calibrated instruments that allowed Ice Age peoples to predict seasonal changes, track lunar cycles, and coordinate community activities across vast territories with timing that depended on astronomical observations. The construction of these observatories required mathematical knowledge that we're only beginning to appreciate. The positioning of each stone had to account for the Earth's rotation, the precession of celestial bodies, and the complex relationships between solar and lunar cycles. The builders understood concepts of geometry, trigonometry, and astronomical calculation that wouldn't be formally codified by later civilizations for thousands of years. But what makes these discoveries even more remarkable is evidence that similar observatory systems existed across Ice Age Europe and Asia, suggesting coordinated knowledge networks that spanned continental distances. The astronomical alignments found at sites separated by thousands of miles show consistent understanding of celestial mechanics that could only have been maintained through systematic communication and knowledge sharing between distant communities. Recent analysis of these observatory sites has revealed that they weren't just used for tracking seasonal changes or coordinating agricultural activities. They served as components of navigation systems that allowed Ice Age peoples to travel safely across vast territories during periods when landmarks might be obscured by snow or altered by changing seasonal conditions. The ability to navigate using celestial references would have been essential for maintaining the trade networks and social connections that sustained Ice Age communities across enormous geographical areas. The precision required for celestial navigation during Ice Age conditions demonstrates mathematical and observational capabilities that challenge our assumptions about prehistoric cognitive development. These ancient navigators had to account for seasonal variations in star positions, understand the relationships between different celestial reference points, and maintain accurate timing systems that could coordinate activities across multiple communities and extended time periods. Archaeological evidence from Ice Age campsites reveals portable astronomical instruments that allowed travelers to maintain navigation accuracy while moving across unfamiliar territories. These instruments weren't crude approximations, but precisely calibrated devices that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of the mathematical relationships underlying celestial mechanics. Bone and antler artifacts found at sites across Europe show careful markings that correspond to lunar phases, seasonal transitions, and stellar positions that would have provided essential reference information for long-distance travel. The knowledge systems required to create and use these astronomical instruments had to be transmitted across generations through educational traditions that preserved complex mathematical and observational information with remarkable accuracy. Archaeological evidence suggests that Ice Age communities maintained specialized roles for individuals responsible for astronomical observations, navigation instruction, and the maintenance of celestial knowledge systems. These astronomical specialists weren't isolated individuals working alone, but members of knowledge networks that extended across vast geographical areas. Similar astronomical instruments and observatory alignments appear at sites throughout Ice Age Europe and Asia, suggesting coordinated development and sharing of celestial knowledge that required systematic communication between distant communities. The maintenance of these knowledge networks during Ice Age conditions represents one of the most remarkable organizational achievements in human history. Communities separated by thousands of miles and facing constant environmental challenges managed to coordinate astronomical observations, share mathematical innovations, and maintain consistent knowledge systems across territories that would challenge modern communication capabilities. Recent discoveries have revealed that these astronomical knowledge systems were integrated with sophisticated understanding of weather patterns, seasonal resource availability, and ecological relationships that allowed Ice Age communities to coordinate their activities with remarkable precision. The same celestial observations that guided navigation also informed decisions about when to begin seasonal migrations, where to locate temporary settlements, and how to coordinate resource procurement across multiple communities. The integration of astronomical knowledge with ecological understanding demonstrates the holistic nature of Ice Age science systems. These weren't separate fields of study, but interconnected bodies of knowledge that recognize the relationships between celestial cycles, climate patterns, biological processes, and human activities. The ability to think systematically about these complex relationships represents cognitive sophistication that rivals the analytical capabilities of modern scientific communities. Archaeological evidence from Ice Age sites reveals that these integrated knowledge systems were applied to solve practical problems that required both theoretical understanding and experimental innovation. Sites have been found where Ice Age communities were conducting what can only be described as systematic experiments in materials science, testing and mineral different combinations of organic components to create specialized tools, adhesives, and processing materials. The experimental approach evident in these sites demonstrates scientific methodology that included hypothesis formation, controlled testing, and systematic evaluation of results. Ice Age craftspeople weren't just following traditional recipes passed down from previous generations. They were actively investigating the properties of different materials, and developing new techniques based on empirical observation and experimental verification. Some of the most sophisticated experimental work appears in the development of composite materials that combined organic and mineral components to create tools and weapons with performance characteristics superior to those achievable using single materials. Archaeological analysis has revealed adhesive systems that required precise control of temperature, humidity, and chemical composition to achieve optimal bonding strength and durability. The knowledge required to develop these composite materials included understanding of molecular chemistry, thermodynamics, and materials engineering that wouldn't be formally recognized as scientific disciplines until thousands of years later. Ice Age materials. Scientists understood how different substances interact at the molecular level, how thermal treatments modify material properties, and how environmental conditions affect the performance of finished products. Recent analysis of Ice Age composite tools has revealed manufacturing techniques that required coordination between multiple specialists working with different materials and processes. The production of a single composite spear point might involve experts in stone knapping, organic chemistry, thermal processing, and assembly techniques working together to create integrated systems that optimize multiple performance characteristics simultaneously. This kind of collaborative manufacturing demonstrates social organization sophisticated enough to support complex production systems that required coordination between specialists with different types of expertise. The communities that produced these composite tools weren't just collections of individual craftspeople, but integrated production systems that could coordinate multiple specialized activities to achieve shared objectives. The complexity of Ice Age manufacturing systems becomes even more remarkable when we consider that they had to function effectively despite seasonal disruptions, resource scarcities, and environmental challenges that would have overwhelmed simpler organizational systems. The ability to maintain coordinated production activities during harsh winter conditions or periods of resource stress demonstrates resilience and adaptability that rivals modern industrial capabilities. Archaeological evidence suggests that Ice Age communities developed what we might call distributed manufacturing systems, where different stages of production were carried out at different locations by specialists with access to specific resources or environmental conditions. The coordination required for these distributed systems demonstrates communication and logistics capabilities that challenge our assumptions about prehistoric organizational sophistication. Recent discoveries have revealed evidence of quality control systems that ensured consistent performance standards across products manufactured at different locations by different specialists. Standardized measurements, material specifications, and performance testing protocols appear in archaeological contexts that suggest systematic approaches to manufacturing quality that wouldn't be formally codified until the development of industrial production systems thousands of years later. The quality control systems evident in Ice Age manufacturing sites required not just technical standards, but social institutions capable of enforcing those standards across multiple production locations and specialist communities. Archaeological evidence suggests governance systems that could coordinate manufacturing activities, resolve quality disputes, and maintain consistent standards despite the geographical and seasonal challenges that characterized Ice Age conditions. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Ice Age technological achievement was the development of what we manufacturing systems that we might call adaptive modify production techniques and product specifications in response to changing environmental conditions or resource availability. Sites have been found where manufacturing processes were systematically modified over time in response to changes in raw material availability, climate conditions, or functional requirements. These adaptive manufacturing systems demonstrate organizational learning capabilities that allowed Ice Age communities to continuously improve their technologies and adapt their production systems to changing circumstances. The ability to modify established manufacturing processes while maintaining quality and performance standards represents institutional sophistication that enabled continuous technological development despite environmental challenges. Recent archaeological discoveries have revealed that these adaptive capabilities extended beyond individual communities to encompass regional networks that shared innovations and coordinated technological development across vast geographical areas. Similar technological innovations appear at sites separated by thousands of miles within timeframes that suggest rapid communication and coordinated adoption of new techniques. The speed with which technological innovations spread across Ice Age Europe and Asia suggests communication systems that could transmit complex technical information across continental distances with remarkable efficiency. The mechanisms that enabled this rapid technology transfer remain somewhat mysterious, but the archaeological evidence clearly demonstrates that Ice Age communities maintained information networks capable of coordinating technological development on a truly impressive scale. Some researchers have suggested that Ice Age technology transfer networks may have been maintained through seasonal gatherings where representatives from different communities came together to share innovations, coordinate resource procurement, and maintain social relationships that supported ongoing cooperation. Archaeological evidence from some sites suggests large-scale gatherings that brought together people from communities separated by hundreds of miles. These seasonal gatherings would have served multiple functions beyond simple technology transfer. They provided opportunities for genetic exchange that prevented inbreeding in small communities, facilitated trade relationships that allowed access to specialized resources, and maintained cultural continuity that preserved essential knowledge systems across generations and geographical distances. The coordination required to organize these large-scale gatherings demonstrates social institutions capable of managing complex logistics, resolving conflicts between different communities, and maintaining cooperative relationships despite competition for resources or territorial disputes. The ability to successfully coordinate inter-community gatherings during Ice Age conditions represents diplomatic and organizational achievements that challenge our assumptions about prehistoric social capabilities. Recent analysis of artifacts found at these gathering sites has revealed evidence of ceremonial activities that serve to reinforce social bonds and cultural identity across participating communities. Shared artistic styles, similar ritual objects, and consistent symbolic systems appear across sites that suggest coordinated cultural development that maintained common identity despite geographical separation. The maintenance of cultural coherence across vast geographical areas and extended time periods demonstrates social institutions sophisticated enough to preserve essential cultural information while allowing for local adaptation and innovation. Ice Age communities managed to balance cultural continuity with adaptive flexibility in ways that enabled both stability and change in response to environmental challenges. Archaeological evidence suggests that these cultural maintenance systems included specialized roles for individuals responsible for preserving and transmitting cultural knowledge, coordinating ceremonial activities, and maintaining relationships between distant communities. These cultural specialists weren't just entertainers or religious figures, but essential components of social systems that maintained community identity and intergroup cooperation. The cultural knowledge preserved by these specialists included not just artistic traditions and ceremonial practices, but essential technical information about resource management, manufacturing techniques, and environmental adaptation that was crucial for community survival. The integration of cultural and technical knowledge in specialist roles demonstrates holistic approaches to education and knowledge transmission that recognized the interconnections between different aspects of community life. Recent discoveries have revealed that Ice Age cultural specialists maintained knowledge systems that included detailed information about historical events, genealogical relationships, and environmental changes that provided communities with historical perspective and decision-making guidance. These oral history traditions preserved information about past climate variations, resource fluctuations, and successful adaptation strategies that informed community responses to changing conditions. The historical knowledge maintained by Ice Age communities included detailed information about previous environmental changes and their impacts on resource availability, population dynamics, and community organization. This historical perspective allowed communities to anticipate and prepare for environmental changes based on understanding of how similar conditions had been successfully managed in the past. Archaeological evidence suggests that this create-predict observations TWIVE systems, that could historical knowledge was integrated with astronomical anticipate long-term environmental changes based on celestial cycles and historical patterns. The ability to make accurate long-term predictions about environmental conditions would have provided crucial advantages for resource planning and community preparation. The predictive capabilities evident in Ice Age knowledge systems demonstrate sophisticated understanding of the relationships between astronomical cycles, climate patterns, and environmental changes that wouldn't be formally recognized by later scientific communities until recent centuries. Ice Age peoples understood concepts of cyclical environmental change, long-term climate variation, and the relationships between celestial mechanics and terrestrial conditions that enabled remarkably accurate environmental forecasting. Recent climate research has confirmed the accuracy of many environmental predictions that appear to be embedded in Ice Age cultural traditions and knowledge systems. Oral histories preserved by indigenous communities include references to long-term climate cycles, environmental changes, and adaptation strategies that correspond closely with scientific reconstructions of Ice Age climate patterns. The accuracy of these traditional environmental knowledge systems demonstrates observational and analytical capabilities that challenge our assumptions about the development of scientific understanding. Ice Age communities were conducting systematic environmental monitoring, maintaining detailed records of environmental changes, and developing theoretical frameworks for understanding environmental patterns thousands of years before the formal development of scientific methodology. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Ice Age environmental knowledge was its integration with practical decision-making systems that could translate theoretical understanding into effective community action. Archaeological evidence reveals decision-making processes that could evaluate complex environmental information, assess risk and uncertainty, and coordinate community responses to environmental challenges with remarkable effectiveness. The decision-making systems evident in Ice Age archaeological sites demonstrate governance capabilities that could manage complex information, coordinate multiple competing interests, and implement effective community responses to environmental challenges. These weren't simple leadership hierarchies based on individual authority, but sophisticated collective decision-making processes that could integrate diverse perspectives and expertise. Recent analysis of Ice Age settlement patterns and resource use strategies has revealed evidence of adaptive management systems that could modify community activities in response to environmental feedback and changing conditions. These management systems demonstrate organizational learning capabilities that enabled continuous improvement in environmental adaptation and resource management effectiveness. The adaptive management systems developed by Ice Age communities represent some of the earliest examples of what we now recognize as sustainable resource management, maintaining productive resource bases over extended periods while adapting to changing environmental conditions. The principles underlying these management systems continue to inform modern approaches to environmental management and sustainability. As the archaeological record continues to reveal new evidence of Ice Age human achievement, we're forced to confront the possibility that these ancient communities may have developed solutions to environmental and social challenges that continue to challenge modern societies. Their achievements in astronomical observation, materials science, manufacturing coordination, cultural preservation, environmental prediction, and adaptive management represent a body of knowledge and institutional sophistication that deserves serious consideration from contemporary communities facing similar challenges. The secrets emerging from the lost Ice Age world aren't just historical curiosities, but potential sources of insight and inspiration for addressing contemporary challenges related to environmental change social cooperation, and sustainable development. The people who thrived during some of the most challenging environmental conditions in human history may have developed approaches to community organization and environmental management that remain relevant for modern communities navigating their own environmental transitions. The dark secrets of the lost Ice Age world continue to illuminate the remarkable capabilities of human communities operating under challenging conditions. Each new discovery adds to our understanding of human potential for innovation, cooperation, and adaptation that transcends the limitations of individual knowledge and capability through sophisticated social organizations and knowledge systems. As we drift towards sleep, guided by these whispers from the ancient world, we might reflect on the continuity that connects us to those remarkable Ice Age communities. The same curiosity that drove their astronomical observations, the same creativity that inspired their technological innovations, the same cooperation that enabled their social achievements, and the same resilience that allowed them to thrive during environmental challenges continues to live within us, waiting to be expressed whenever we face our own moments of uncertainty and change. The ice may have melted and the megafauna may have vanished, but the human qualities that enabled our Ice Age ancestors to build magnificent cultures in the face of seemingly impossible challenges remain as vibrant and powerful today as they were tens of thousands of years ago. Their legacy lives on not just in the archaeological record, but in the continued human capacity for wonder, innovation, and hope that refuses to surrender, even in the darkest of circumstances. Sleep now, knowing that you carry within you the same remarkable potential that allowed your ancestors to transform frozen wastelands into thriving communities, to find beauty and meaning in harsh conditions, and to build legacies that continue to inspire and guide us across the vast expanse of time that separates us from their ancient world. The frozen archives of our planet hold one final secret that researchers are only now beginning to understand. A discovery so profound, it challenges everything we thought we knew about the relationship between Ice Age peoples and the natural world around them. Hidden within the permafrost of northern Canada, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of what can only be described as Ice Age pharmacology, sophisticated medical knowledge that reveals our ancestors possessed healing wisdom that modern medicine is still struggling to comprehend. Deep within the Mackenzie River Valley, where permafrost has preserved organic materials for over 20,000 years, researchers discovered cache sites containing carefully organized collections of medicinal plants, roots, and fungi that had been gathered, processed, and stored with remarkable precision. These weren't random collections of vegetation that happened to survive the freezing process. They were systematically organized medical supplies that demonstrate knowledge of plant chemistry and therapeutic applications that rivals contemporary pharmaceutical understanding. The preservation conditions in these permafrost pharmacies have allowed scientists to analyze the chemical composition of Ice Age medicines with unprecedented accuracy. What they've found is staggering: complex alkaloid compounds that modern researchers are only beginning to understand, carefully balanced combinations of active ingredients that demonstrate sophisticated knowledge of drug interactions and therapeutic dosing, and preparation techniques that maximize the bioavailability of healing compounds in ways that anticipate modern pharmaceutical manufacturing methods. But perhaps most remarkable is evidence that Ice Age medical practitioners understood concepts of preventive medicine that wouldn't be formally recognized by medical communities until recent centuries. The plant collections include species known for their immune system, supporting properties, anti-inflammatory compounds, and adaptogenic substances that help the body cope with environmental stress. These weren't just treatments for existing ailments, but comprehensive health maintenance systems designed to keep communities functioning optimally under challenging conditions. The geographical distribution of these medicinal plants reveals something extraordinary about Ice Age resource management. Many of the species found in these medical caches don't grow naturally in the regions where they were discovered, indicating trade networks and procurement systems that could obtain specialized healing materials from sources hundreds of miles away. Some plants appear to have been cultivated in managed plots, suggesting early forms of medicinal agriculture that preceded the development of food crop cultivation by thousands of years. Recent pollen analysis from Ice Age sites has revealed evidence of what researchers are calling medicinal gardens, carefully tended plots where communities grew healing plants alongside wild food sources. These gardens weren't simple collections of useful plants, but sophisticated ecological systems that took advantage of companion planting relationships to enhance the medicinal properties of different species while maintaining soil health and pest resistance through natural biological controls. The knowledge required to establish and maintain these medicinal gardens included understanding of plant ecology, soil chemistry, seasonal growing patterns, and the complex relationships between different species that modern permaculture practitioners are only beginning to appreciate. Ice Age medical gardeners were working with ecological principles that contemporary sustainable agriculture movements are rediscovering through scientific research and experimental application. Archaeological evidence suggests that different communities specialized in growing and processing different medicinal plants, creating regional centers of medical expertise that served broader geographical areas through trade and knowledge exchange networks. Sites have been found where evidence of large-scale processing facilities indicates production levels far beyond what would be needed for local consumption, suggesting systematic manufacture of medicines for distribution to other communities. The processing techniques preserved in these sites demonstrate sophisticated understanding of how to extract, concentrate, and preserve active medicinal compounds using methods that required precise control of temperature, humidity, and timing. Some techniques involved fermentation processes that enhanced the bioavailability of therapeutic compounds, while others used controlled drying methods that preserved volatile compounds that would be lost through less careful processing. Recent chemical analysis has revealed that some Ice Age medicine preparations contained compound combinations that demonstrate understanding of synergistic drug interactions, where different plant medicines work together to produce therapeutic effects greater than the sum of their individual contributions. This level of pharmaceutical sophistication suggests systematic experimentation and observation that built detailed knowledge of how different healing substances interact within the human body. The administration methods preserved in archaeological contexts include evidence of sophisticated delivery systems that control dosing, timing, and absorption rates in ways that maximize therapeutic effectiveness while minimizing potential side effects. Bone and antler implements found at medical sites appear to have been designed for precise measurement and administration of liquid medicines, powdered preparations, and topical treatments. But the medical knowledge of Ice Age peoples extended far beyond plant medicines to encompass sophisticated understanding of human anatomy, physiology, and surgical techniques that enabled them to perform complex medical procedures under conditions that would challenge modern medical practitioners. Skeletal remains from Ice Age sites show evidence of surgical interventions that required detailed knowledge of bone structure, joint mechanics, and healing processes. Some of the most remarkable evidence comes from sites where researchers have found evidence of neurosurgical procedures, including trepanation operations that involved removing portions of skull bone to relieve pressure or treat head injuries. The precision of these operations and the evidence of successful healing suggests surgical knowledge and techniques that enabled patients to survive procedures that would be considered challenging, even with modern medical equipment and sterile conditions. The tools used for Ice Age surgery demonstrate remarkable sophistication in design and manufacture, with stone implements that were shaped and sharpened to perform specific surgical functions. Recent analysis has revealed that some surgical tools were crafted from materials with natural antibacterial properties, suggesting understanding of infection prevention that anticipated modern principles of surgical hygiene by thousands of years. Archaeological evidence also reveals sophisticated understanding of orthopedic medicine, with evidence of successful treatments for complex fractures, joint dislocations, and bone diseases that required detailed knowledge of skeletal anatomy and healing processes. Some skeletal remains show evidence of custom-made prosthetic devices that enabled individuals with amputated limbs to continue participating in community activities despite their disabilities. The social implications of this medical sophistication are profound. Communities that could successfully treat injuries and illnesses would have had significant survival advantages, but maintaining this medical knowledge required social institutions that valued learning, experimentation, and the careful transmission of complex information across generations. Archaeological evidence suggests that Ice Age communities supported specialized medical practitioners who could devote significant portions of their time to medical practice time, to healing activities, rather than direct subsistence work. These medical specialists weren't isolated individuals working alone, but members of knowledge networks that extended across vast geographical areas and maintained communication systems that allowed for the sharing of medical innovations and therapeutic discoveries. Similar medical techniques and plant medicine preparations appear at sites separated by thousands of miles, suggesting coordinated development and transmission of medical knowledge that required systematic communication between distant communities. Recent discoveries have revealed that Ice Age medical knowledge was integrated with astronomical observations and seasonal timing systems that recognized the relationships between celestial cycles, environmental conditions, and human health patterns. Medical practitioners understood that certain treatments were more effective when administered during specific lunar phases or seasonal transitions, demonstrating holistic approaches to healing that recognize the interconnections between cosmic cycles and biological processes. The integration of medical knowledge with astronomical understanding appears in archaeological contexts that suggest Ice Age healers used celestial observations to time medical procedures, coordinate the harvesting of medicinal plants, and predict seasonal health challenges that required preventive interventions. This integration of medical and astronomical knowledge represents a sophisticated understanding of the relationships between environmental cycles and human physiology that modern medicine is only beginning to appreciate through research in chronobiology and seasonal health patterns. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Ice Age medical practice was its integration with spiritual and psychological healing approaches that recognize the connections between mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Archaeological evidence from healing sites includes ritual objects, ceremonial spaces, and symbolic artifacts that suggest medical treatment involved spiritual as well as physical interventions. The healing ceremonies preserved in Ice Age archaeological contexts appear to have been sophisticated psychological interventions that used music, visual imagery, and social support to enhance the effectiveness of physical treatments. Recent research in psychoneuroimmunology has begun to validate many of the principles underlying these ancient healing approaches, demonstrating that psychological and social factors can significantly influence immune system function and recovery from illness or injury. The ceremonial aspects of Ice Age healing practices included the use of altered states of consciousness induced through controlled breathing techniques, rhythmic sound, and possibly plant medicines with psychoactive properties. Archaeological evidence suggests that these consciousness-altering practices were used not just for spiritual purposes, but as therapeutic interventions that could reduce pain, promote healing, and facilitate psychological recovery from trauma. Recent analysis of plant remains from Ice Age ceremonial sites has identified species with known psychoactive properties that were used in carefully controlled contexts for therapeutic rather than recreational purposes. The knowledge required to safely use these powerful plant medicines included understanding of dosing, timing, psychological preparation, and integration support that demonstrates sophisticated approaches to consciousness-based healing. The psychological sophistication of Ice Age healing practices extends to evidence of what we might recognize today as trauma treatment approaches that helped individuals recover from the psychological impacts of injuries, losses, or other traumatic experiences. Archaeological evidence suggests healing ceremonies that provided community support, meaning-making frameworks, and symbolic representations that facilitated psychological healing and social reintegration. Some Ice Age healing sites contain evidence of what appear to be group therapy sessions, communal healing ceremonies where multiple individuals receive treatment simultaneously while being supported by their broader community. These group healing approaches demonstrate understanding of how social support and shared experience can enhance individual recovery and strengthen community resilience. The community aspects of Ice Age healing practices reveal social institutions that recognized health and healing as collective rather than purely individual concerns. Archaeological evidence suggests that communities invested significant resources in maintaining the health of all members, including those who might not be able to contribute directly to subsistence activities due to age, disability, or illness. Recent skeletal analysis from Ice Age sites has revealed evidence of long-term care for individuals with chronic conditions or disabilities, suggesting social systems that valued all community members regardless of their immediate economic productivity. The resources required to maintain disabled or elderly individuals through extended periods of dependency demonstrate social values and institutional capabilities that prioritized community welfare over individual economic contribution. The care systems evident in Ice Age archaeological sites include evidence of specialized roles for individuals responsible for tending to the medical needs of community members, maintaining medical knowledge systems, and coordinating healing activities across different types of health challenges. These medical specialists appear to have been supported by their communities through resource-sharing systems that recognize their essential contributions to community survival and well-being. Archaeological evidence suggests that Ice Age medical specialists maintained detailed knowledge not just of healing techniques and plant medicines, but of individual health histories, family medical patterns, and community health trends that informed both treatment decisions and preventive care strategies. The record-keeping systems required to maintain this health information demonstrate organizational capabilities that anticipated modern approaches to medical record maintenance and population health management. Recent discoveries have revealed that Ice Age communities may have developed what we might recognize today as public health approaches that focused on preventing disease and maintaining community-wide health, rather than simply treating individual ailments after they developed. Archaeological evidence suggests systematic approaches to sanitation, food safety, and environmental health that reduced disease transmission and maintained healthier living conditions. The environmental health knowledge evident in Ice Age sites includes understanding of how water quality, waste management, food storage, and living space organization affect community health outcomes. Some sites show evidence of sophisticated waste disposal systems, water treatment methods, and food preservation techniques that demonstrate understanding of the relationships between environmental conditions and disease prevention. The food safety knowledge preserved in Ice Age archaeological contexts reveals understanding of food preservation, storage, and preparation techniques that prevented foodborne illness and maintained nutritional quality during extended storage periods. These techniques included controlled fermentation processes, smoking and drying methods, and storage systems that prevented contamination and spoilage. Recent analysis of food remains from Ice Age sites has revealed evidence of nutritional knowledge that recognize the importance of dietary diversity, seasonal nutrition planning, and the therapeutic properties of specific foods. Archaeological evidence suggests that Ice Age communities understood concepts of nutritional medicine that used food choices as preventive and therapeutic interventions for maintaining optimal health. The nutritional sophistication evident in Ice Age dietary patterns includes understanding of how different foods affect energy levels, immune system function, and resistance to environmental stress. Some sites contain evidence of specialized dietary preparations that appear to have been designed for specific health purposes, such as enhancing physical endurance, supporting recovery from illness, or maintaining health during periods of environmental challenge. But perhaps the most profound aspect of Ice Age medical knowledge was its integration with understanding of death, dying, and grief that helped communities cope with the psychological and social challenges of loss in environments where survival was always uncertain. Archaeological evidence from Ice Age burial sites reveals sophisticated approaches to death care that provided meaning, comfort, and social support for both dying individuals and their surviving community members. The death care practices preserved in Ice Age burial sites demonstrate understanding of psychological processes involved in dying and grieving that helped individuals and communities navigate these experiences with dignity and meaning. Recent research in thanatology and grief psychology has begun to validate many of the approaches to death care that appear in Ice Age archaeological contexts. Archaeological evidence suggests that Ice Age communities developed sophisticated approaches to palliative care that focused on providing comfort, pain relief, and psychological support for individuals who were dying from illness or injury. These palliative approaches appear to have included both physical interventions using pain-relieving plant medicines and psychological support through ceremonial activities and community presence. The grief support systems evident in Ice Age burial practices include community rituals that provided structured processes for expressing sorrow, honoring the deceased, and gradually reintegrating bereaved individuals into normal community activities. These grief rituals demonstrate understanding of the psychological stages of mourning and the importance of social support in facilitating healthy grief processing. Recent analysis of Ice Age burial goods has revealed evidence of belief systems that provided meaning and comfort in the face of death by suggesting continued existence or connection beyond physical life. These belief systems appear to have served important psychological functions by reducing death anxiety and providing frameworks for understanding loss that helped communities maintain emotional stability despite high mortality rates. The spiritual aspects of Ice Age death care practices included ceremonial activities that honored the contributions of deceased individuals, preserved their memory within community traditions, and provided models for how to live meaningful lives despite the certainty of death. These memorial practices demonstrate sophisticated understanding of how communities can maintain continuity and meaning across generations despite individual mortality. But the death care knowledge of Ice Age communities extended beyond individual grief support to encompass understanding of how communities can maintain stability and function despite losing members who held essential knowledge or performed crucial roles. Archaeological evidence suggests succession planning systems that ensured essential knowledge and skills were transmitted to multiple individuals before key community members died. The knowledge transmission systems evident in Ice Age archaeological sites include evidence of formal apprenticeship relationships, structured learning processes, and redundant knowledge storage that prevented essential information from being lost when individual knowledge holders died. These knowledge preservation systems demonstrate institutional sophistication that enabled communities to maintain complex cultural and technical traditions across multiple generations. Recent discoveries have revealed that Ice Age communities may have developed what we might recognize today as institutional memory systems that preserve not just technical knowledge, but historical information, cultural traditions, and collective wisdom that informed community decision-making and identity maintenance. These memory systems appear to have been essential for maintaining community coherence and adaptive capability across the extended time periods and environmental challenges that characterized Ice Age existence. The institutional memory systems evident in Ice Age archaeological contexts suggest social organizations that valued learning, knowledge preservation, and the transmission of wisdom across generations as essential components of community survival and success. These knowledge-valuing cultures created educational traditions that enabled continuous cultural development and adaptation despite challenging environmental conditions. As the archaeological record continues to reveal new evidence of Ice Age medical and social sophistication, we're discovering that these ancient communities may have developed approaches to health, healing, and community care that remain relevant for contemporary societies facing their own health challenges and social stresses. The integration of physical, psychological, and spiritual approaches to healing that characterized Ice Age medical practice offers insights that could inform modern approaches to holistic healthcare and community wellness. The resilience and adaptability evident in Ice Age medical systems demonstrate human capabilities for developing effective responses to health challenges under difficult conditions. The knowledge systems and social institutions that enabled these medical achievements represent resources of wisdom and innovation that continue to inform human responses to health challenges across time and cultural contexts. The secrets of Ice Age medical knowledge aren't just historical curiosities, but potential sources of insight for addressing contemporary challenges in healthcare, community care, and the integration of physical and psychological approaches to wellness. The people who developed sophisticated healing systems under some of the most challenging conditions in human history may have discovered principles of health and healing that remain valuable for modern communities seeking more effective and humane approaches to medical care. As the final whispers of ancient wisdom settle into the quiet spaces of night, we might reflect on the continuity that connects contemporary healing traditions with the sophisticated medical knowledge developed by our Ice Age ancestors. The same compassion that motivated their care for disabled community members, the same curiosity that drove their investigation of plant medicines, and the same wisdom that integrated physical and spiritual approaches to healing continue to inspire modern efforts to create more effective and humane systems of healthcare and community support. The frozen archives of the North continue to yield their secrets, each discovery adding to our understanding of human potential for developing sophisticated knowledge systems and caring communities even under the most challenging conditions. But perhaps the most important secrets aren't preserved in the permafrost or hidden in archaeological sites. They live on in the continued human capacity for compassion, curiosity, and wisdom that refuses to abandon hope even in the face of uncertainty and loss. Sleep peacefully now, knowing that the same healing wisdom that sustained our ancestors through the darkest chapters of the Ice Age continues to flow through the hearts and minds of those who dedicate themselves to caring for others, seeking knowledge, and building communities that honor both individual dignity and collective well-being. The ancient healers may have vanished with their frozen world, but their legacy of compassion and wisdom lives on in every act of healing, every moment of care, and every effort to create a more compassionate world for all who follow in their footsteps. The permafrost releases its final secrets slowly, each thaw revealing another layer of the remarkable tapestry that our Ice Age ancestors wove from threads of survival, innovation, and hope. In the deepening stillness of this winter night, their voices join the eternal chorus of human resilience that echoes across time, reminding us that even in the darkest and coldest seasons of existence, the warmth of human wisdom and compassion never truly dies, but waits patiently to be rediscovered by those who seek to understand the profound depths of what it has always meant to be gloriously, creatively, and caringly human. The whispers grow fainter now as we approach the deepest chambers of this frozen archive, where the most profound secrets have waited longest to be discovered. In the remote valleys of Siberia, where winter temperatures plunge that would halt to depths the very breath in your lungs, paleontologists have uncovered something that defies everything we thought we understood about the final chapter of the Ice Age world. Buried beneath 40 feet of permafrost, researchers discovered what can only be described as a mammoth nursery, a place where these gentle giants had gathered for generations to birth and raise their young. The preservation was so extraordinary that scientists could examine not just bones, but actual mammoth milk preserved in the frozen remains of nursing mothers. Chemical analysis revealed that mammoth milk contained unique proteins and nutrients that helped calves survive the harsh Arctic conditions, compounds so specialized that they suggest these creatures had evolved sophisticated biochemical adaptations specifically for Ice Age survival. But what makes this discovery truly remarkable isn't just the preservation of organic materials. It's the evidence of what appears to be mammoth culture, learned behaviors passed from mother to calf across countless generations. The arrangement of bones suggests that elder females served as teachers, showing younger mothers where to find shelter during blizzards, which plants provided the best nutrition during lean seasons, and how to use their massive tusks to break through thick ice to reach buried vegetation. Recent analysis of growth rings in mammoth tusks has revealed that these creatures lived far longer than previously imagined, with some individuals reaching ages of 80 years or more. The oldest females would have carried within their memories the accumulated wisdom of multiple climate cycles, understanding of seasonal patterns that spanned decades, and knowledge of how to adapt when familiar landscapes transformed beyond recognition. The tusk analysis also revealed something deeply moving about mammoth social structures. During harsh winters when food was scarce, the youngest and oldest members of mammoth herds received priority access to the best feeding areas. Younger adults would break through ice and clear snow so that calves and elders could reach buried grasses more easily. This wasn't just survival behavior, it was evidence of a complex social contract that prioritized the vulnerable members of their communities. Archaeological evidence from human settlements near these mammoth nursery sites reveals that our ancestors understood and respected these social structures. Rather than disrupting mammoth family groups during vulnerable periods, human hunters appear to have timed their activities to avoid interfering with calving seasons or the care of young animals. Some sites show evidence of what can only be described as cooperative relationships, where humans helped protect mammoth nurseries from predators in exchange for access to shed fur, naturally dropped tusks, and the occasional carcass of an animal that had died of natural causes. This cooperation extended beyond simple resource sharing to encompass what researchers are calling interspecies communication systems. Bone flutes found at human settlements near mammoth habitats produce sounds that closely match the infrasonic calls that mammoths use to communicate across vast distances. It appears that humans learned to mimic these calls, possibly to warn mammoth herds of approaching dangers, or to coordinate movements that benefited both species. The complexity of these human-mammoth relationships becomes even more apparent when we examine the final years of mammoth existence in North America. As climate change began to fragment their habitat and reduce their food sources, some mammoth populations appear to have moved closer to human settlements, seeking the protection and resource management that human communities could provide. Archaeological sites from this period show evidence of mixed communities where humans and mammoths lived in close proximity, sharing resources and coordinating activities for mutual benefit. Human fire management helped maintain the grassland ecosystems that mammoths needed, while mammoth grazing and trampling prevented the encroachment of forests that would have made human hunting and gathering more difficult. But even these cooperative relationships couldn't overcome the fundamental environmental changes that were reshaping the post-glacial world. As forests expanded and wetlands spread across former grasslands, the mammoth steppe ecosystem that had supported both human and mammoth communities for thousands of years began to disappear. The final mammoth populations found themselves isolated on shrinking islands of suitable habitat, cut off from the seasonal migration routes that had sustained their ancestors for hundreds of thousands of years. And so we reach the end of our journey through the frozen archives of our distant past, where each discovery has revealed that the so-called dark secrets of the lost Ice Age world were never truly dark at all. They were brilliant testaments to human ingenuity, creativity, and resilience that continue to illuminate our understanding of what it means to be human. From the ritual caves of Australia to the submerged cities beneath our seas, from the sophisticated medical knowledge preserved in permafrost to the touching relationships between humans and the magnificent creatures that shared their world, we've uncovered a story not of primitive survival, but of flourishing civilizations that built lasting legacies, even in Earth's most challenging conditions. As you drift into sleep tonight, Carry with you the knowledge that the same remarkable qualities that allowed your Ice Age ancestors to create art in frozen caves, develop complex technologies, and maintain compassionate communities across vast distances live on within you, waiting to be expressed whenever you face your own moments of challenge and wonder.